So, outside of Hitman, which is always online, it's not looking good for AAA stealth games. PC Gamer recommends 2012's Dishonored, 2021's Hitman 3, and 2016's Metal Gear Solid 5. Games Radar recommends 2022's A Plague Tale Requiem, which is apparently similar to other stealth games that I've played, 2000's Thief 2, The Metal Age, 2020's The Last of Us Part 2, 2014's Alien Isolation, and 2016's Dishonored 2. And lastly, GameRanks, they don't really have anything. Also, and I mean this with no disrespect to other gaming news outlets, it speaks volumes that neither IGN or GameSpot, of course the biggest game outlets, aren't reporting on this genre anymore. If you couldn't tell by now, it's pretty clear that the AAA stealth genre isn't looking too good. The recurring games that appear on all these lists are Dishonored 2, Metal Gear Solid 5, and Hitman 3, and while these are all outstanding games that I've been playing since 2015, the next generation of stealth games on the horizon aren't looking too good. With the exception of Project 007, and in line with the rest of the industry, all we have left are remakes and reboots of games established during the 6th generation of consoles. It doesn't help that stealth mechanics have been largely integrated in games, causing The Last of Us Part 2 and Star Wars Outlaws to appear on the best stealth games of 2024 lists either. So why am I complaining about stealth mechanics in games and the lack of AAA stealth games? Well, let's rip the band-aid off and ask ourselves, what happened to AAA stealth games? The first area that I'd like to address is market saturation. Whenever a piece of media pioneers a popular genre or subgenre, competitors quickly move in and try to steal players away through innovating or simply mimicking an established formula. This increased competition can negatively impact developers and publishers' future projects as consumers slowly grow more exhausted with each subsequent release, at least in theory. A great example of this can be seen with platformers. Platformers became very popular with the release of 1981's Donkey Kong. This game's success birthed the platformer genre and became a landmark title in the video game medium. This game would spawn a plethora of competitors and become a household genre until Sega and Nintendo, mostly Nintendo for being honest, became the last of the AAA studios to develop platformers. This story would repeat in 1987 with Hideo Kojima's Metal Gear. Metal Gear's success would spawn a sequel with Metal Gear 2 and eventually lead to one of the most influential games of all time, Metal Gear Solid. These games would go on to inspire Thief, Hitman, and the Splinter Cell series, and while all of these franchises were successful, more and even more games would be released until players got tired of them and wanted something fresh. As action games and shooters became more common, studios would gradually implement stealth mechanics into their games to provide another layer of complexity to their systems. Using Prey, my 2017 Game of the Year, as an example, notice how enemies have detection gauges and how the game rewards players with additional damage for striking enemies in the rear. These identical mechanics can be found in the Batman Arkham series, Metro series, The Last of Us, and so many other franchises. Things look even worse when you compare these games' sales figures to Dishonored 2, which only sold 2.5 million copies. When asking my friends about stealth games, the general consensus is that most of them prefer stealth mechanics over traditional stealth games. I believe this is because stealth games are inherently punishing and rewards perfection. Stealth games tend to have the best gear locked behind hard to achieve ranks. These ranks, and sometimes difficulties, encourage players to play these games to near perfection. Combine this challenge with how fragile stealth game characters are, the risk of being discovered near the end of the level, and of course playing all these games, it makes sense why players were fatigued from the genre. The explosion of online multiplayer games during the 7th generation of consoles certainly didn't help either. Before I keep going, I'd like to remind everyone that if you're enjoying this video, a subscription and like would go a far way in helping the channel grow. Thank you so much for your support, and back to the video. The 7th generation is largely remembered for ushering players into the multiplayer era. People my age, God I'm getting old, were early teens at the time playing Halo, Call of Duty, and Battlefield. Call of Duty in particular deserves an honorable mention for popularizing unlocking guns and weapon attachments at specific levels. Playing these games casually and competitively with friends would become a staple in the industry for generations to come. In my opinion, this innovation in gaming was a large factor as to why stealth games further declined. Stealth games, by their nature, do not inherently lend themselves to being competitive multiplayer games and are inherently more difficult to monetize. By design and playing with your friends, of course, multiplayer games have an inherent edge with player retention. The nature of multiplayer games fosters a sense of community, encouraging players to grind them out. Combine this with unlockables, levels, battle passes, microtransactions, and everything else, and you have games that are manufactured to drive player retention and be monetized. None of this modern game design philosophy lends itself to stealth games or most other single player games at that. The last stealth game trying to do something new with its release was Hitman 2016, and there's a reason why we never went back to that. Now, with all of that said, these games wouldn't have a niche following if they were bad, nor would I be making this video. So let's finally answer the question of why you should care about stealth games. If you watched either of my previous videos videos on SMT3 Nocturne or the Resident Evil remake, which you definitely should if you're interested, you'll know that I dedicated a portion of those videos to discussing the engrossing dungeon and level designs found throughout these games, and stealth games are no exception here either. Stealth game levels are as large as they are dense. They're designed to present players with a myriad of approaches to achieve their goal. Players can look for windows, back doors, pipes to climb, and other alternate paths to eliminate your target if you so choose. Additionally, exploring every route and experimenting with different equipment is impossible in one run, which leads to my next topic of the infinite replay value that these games provide. Earlier I said stealth games present you with a myriad of approaches to eliminating your target. So, what happens if you don't want to eliminate your target? Well, certain stealth games provide non-lethal alternatives for dealing with these targets. When you look at the plethora of approaches that players have for dealing with targets, challenges, paths to approach targets, multiple endings, and the sandbox nature encouraging player experimentation, you can probably understand how some people have thousands of hours in these games and the niche following that they have. Another thing that I love about stealth games is the catharsis you get by remaining unnoticed. When players learn enemy locations, NPC sightlines, pathing routes, item locations, and fully utilize the game's mechanics, players tend to enter a flow-like state where they will beat levels while remaining undetected. This feeling of completely understanding a map's flow and nuances paired with the intimate understanding of the game's system has players feel like ghosts as we discreetly pass through levels like an assassin. And while other genres achieve this feeling as well, the method of how you achieve this feeling is what makes stealth games so remarkable. The last thing I have to say is more of a personal anecdote and not really analytical or well thought out, so I'll just rip the band-aid off. Stealth games are also just kind of cool. Being an assassin, hitman, agent, or whatever is just kind of dope. The mysterious world of receiving a hit from an employer and them telling you to finish the job is just cool. The flexibility in elimination allows us to roleplay movie characters, be up close and personal, or make everything look like an accident while casually walking away. You can probably tell that I grew up watching a lot of James Bond movies and espionage movies by now, but it's cool just sneaking around, keeping a low profile while stalking your target, or turning everything into a shootout when you're discovered. And when you do find yourself in these scenarios where you're in a shootout, you can get very creative because of how expansive the level design and the tools the game provides. Nevertheless, these games are niche and will most likely continue to thrive in the indie and AA space. AAA stealth games will probably further cement themselves as a niche as they target an older demographic looking for a very specific type of game. When looking at this in parallel to the rising development costs, the reliance on the games as a service model, and the challenge of monetizing single-player games, it's not surprising that AAA studios see stealth games as a poor investment. And unfortunately, like most of the other mediums, I guess we'll have to rely on the old guard to carry us in the future with IO Interactive's 007 game, Konami's Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, and Ubisoft's Splinter Cell reboot. These games, like MGS5, may break even or sell well, but the future, much like the rest of the AAA industry, is up in the air. And you know what? That might be okay since we have almost 2 decades of incredible stealth games to cherish. Alright, so I know that this video is a little bit different from like the typical like video analysis that I usually do, but this pretty much rounds out what I want this channel to be. Just a lot of analysis and some discussion whenever I feel like I have a unique perspective that I can bring to you guys. So also, I like the length of this video, so we're going to try to keep this pretty brief. So a couple of questions for you guys. What other dormant genres like AAA stealth games would you be interested in coming back? What are some of your favorite series? Do you prefer stealth mechanics over stealth games? Like, where are you in this whole stealth discussion? The last thing I really wanted to thank everybody for was all the support on the last couple of videos. Those last videos have actually shattered my expectations. Like, I really wasn't expecting that much support. So welcome to all the new subs. Thank you so much for all the support on the last videos. I'll have more stuff coming in the future, and just, you know, be sure to subscribe, do the bell ringing thing that everyone tells you to do. And yeah, I'll catch you guys later. See ya.